Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special hour-long edition of the Hoops HQ show. Seth Davis, along with Andy Katz. We are officially in the heat of summer, and so we have a lot to cover, both in terms of things that have just recently happened and spinning ahead. Particularly, going to take a look at summertime recruiting, what we're looking forward to that. You're going to be seeing a lot of coverage of these they're called the AAU tournaments. Of course, it's not officially the Amateur Athletic Union, but you get the gist. Lots going on. Andy, good to see you, my man. I think we start with what just happened, and that's the 2026 NBA Draft is in the books. You were on hand covering it for us at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. Kind of an interesting vibe going on there. Andy, I want to get your general takeaways of the draft. Let me start with this because I was doing an interview a couple of days ago with my longtime friend Maggie Gray for her new podcast, and she was asking about the NBA draft. I kind of made the point that, I didn't think that there were necessarily any, generational players along the lines of a Wemby, even a Cooper Flagg in this draft. Obviously, we had a very firm 4 players at the top that were projected to go. They went in the order that they were projected to go in terms of A.J. DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, Cameron Boozer, Caleb Wilson. I think those guys are really good NBA players. They'll be in the league for a long time, win a lot of games, maybe even play in a few All-Star games. But again, I didn't see necessarily a generational talent. I think that what's distinguishable about this draft is the depth. I think there are a lot of really, really good players, a lot of really, really good freshmen in the first round. But, when I said that, Maggie seemed a little bit surprised because we've been talking about this draft as like, oh my God, this draft class is amazing. Again, I think it's the number of good players, the depth, the number of great freshmen who went in the first round, but not necessarily generational players like a Wemby, Cooper Flagg. What do you think? Was I off base on that, or would you agree?
I agree 100%. Look, the draft lacked drama because it was very predictable, but that doesn't mean that it was disappointing because I think this freshman class especially lived up to the hype, met the moment. I think this freshman class will go down as one of the most productive freshman classes in men's college basketball we've seen in quite some time. But yeah, it's the depth, not just in the first round, but in the second round, of players that I'm going to be interested to see maybe 5 years from now, how many of the 60 players contribute, because it's not always a high number that actually contribute for a significant number of years, games, you name it. But that's where I thought this draft, as we led up to it the last 2 years, was going to have a bit of a legacy in its impact, not in its superstar status, but in its ability to have a number of different players have an impact over a period of years, whatever, if we want to say 2, 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I think there were 14 freshmen, if I have my count right, picked in the first round of the draft. I don't know if that's an all-time high. It's pretty close. And all the top 8 players in the draft were freshmen. So, and by the way, that doesn't include Braylon Mullins, who went back to school, and some other freshmen who would have had a chance to go in the first round. Thomas Houck is another first round lottery pick, went back to Florida. A couple of other guys who I think had that opportunity. And there's always conversation also, Andy, about guys, decisions about whether or not you go into the draft. Guys with eligibility left. Koa Pete, for example, Arizona, was the last pick selected in the first round. If he had gone back to Arizona, he would have made a lot of money. Isaiah Evans at Duke was picked 33rd overall, so he was the 3rd pick of the second round. Malik Thomas of Arkansas as a freshman, he was picked in the second round. And of course, I think the poster child this year is Henry Vesar, who fell all the way to the 52nd pick of the draft. So midway through the 22nd pick in the second round, he could have gone back to North Carolina for a lot of money. Look, I think it's very easy to say in hindsight that guys made mistakes, but I also think people missed the mark in terms of actually what goes into this decision. Koa Pete is a great example. If he had gone back to Arizona, he probably almost certainly would have made more playing for Arizona than he's going to make next season in the NBA. I think Vesar at North Carolina as a big man probably could have commanded $3, $4, $5 million as a middle second round pick, maybe not even a guaranteed contract. But 2 things, Andy. First of all, the rookie contract is set, so you make your money on the second contract. So guys sometimes want to go into the league because it starts their clock earlier to get to that second contract and big money. And then a lot of guys, I think this is really the case with Vasar, they just don't want to be in college. He's an international player and wanted to get his professional career started. So they understand that in the immediate term, that first year, they might and maybe probably will make less money than if they had played in college. But there are other reasons to turn pro. What did you think about that whole conversation about guys who came back and decided to go pro or not go to school?
Well, first of all, I think they're two different cases. You're right about Vasar. Remember, he started at Arizona. So Arizona, North Carolina, he's been in school, for quite some time. And so, yeah, and he's an international guy. So, he fully expected to be in the first round. Didn't happen. We'll see if it pans out for him. With Koa Pete, and this is still TBD. So initially he gets drafted by Dallas, which I thought would have been a great fit for him because it would have taken pressure off him with Cooper Flagg, obviously Dusty May, new coach who knows him. Then he gets traded to Phoenix, and that's going to go one of two ways. Okay. On the positive side, it's your home. You're going to have protection, if you will. You're on a team that has got a lot of talent, underachieved a little bit, but there's enough talent where it's not going to be the expectation won't be there for him to like produce next season. So he might be protected a little bit. Now on the flip side, it could be like, you're the hometown kid. Why aren't you playing? There could be that kind of pressure of being at home and dealing with all, your family, your friends, and the, tickets and all that kind of stuff that would come with it. So that would sort of to be determined. And if the fit is right, yes, he lost some money, but that's okay. As long as he's with the right team. It doesn't always happen that way. But if they do, then it can work out well. One of my favorite examples, I'm dating myself here, where fit mattered. I'm going to go way back to when Troy Bell, who was the Big East Player of the Year out of BC, he gets drafted by Memphis, Jerry West. And it was in the mid-teens. Dante Jones was also part of that with him to go to the Grizzlies. And the problem was Hubie Brown doesn't like to play rookie guards. So he didn't play. And it basically sidelined, and maybe this would have happened anyway with his NBA career, but it never got off the ground because the fit wasn't there. And so you could be picked 15 spots higher, but if it's not the right fit, you could be out of the league in 2 or 3 years. So that's what we'll have to wait and see on Koa Pete.
Yeah. Just a couple of things to tie this up. First of all, it was kind of hilarious how many players were getting traded on draft night. I don't know what the numbers are, but certainly watching it and following it, it certainly felt like it was a lot more frequent, especially in the second round. I think all but maybe a half dozen players who were chosen in the second round were traded right away. So by the time they get their hat and they're doing their interview, so a lot of people complaining about that. And then also people saying, well, let's just do this all on one night because it was a better show. It's called money, everybody. It's called money. If ESPN can divide this up into 2 nights and make more money, they're going to make more money. It's not about you having a better time on Twitter, especially for people
well,
like
and the
us.
one quick thing, Seth, I'll just say that, the famous example is, I think it was Jokic in the Taco Bell commercial. I did those drafts. I was working for ESPN on the draft during that draft. And I can tell you the problem was when we got to the second round, they had to jam all those commercials in.
Right.
And so many picks were never heard on the broadcast. They were just they'd come back and Reese or whoever was hosting the time would just sort of say, well, since we're gone, 3 other players got picked. And so I think the NBA looked at that also and was like, hey, all these guys missed their moment. So that was, in addition to getting more commercial time and all that, that's true. Yeah. It also just really wasn't fair to those players.
I have a running joke with my colleague at CBS, Adam Zucker. He got this from Rick Neuheisel, and I'm sure Rick got it somewhere else. And the phrase is this: the answer is money. Now, what was the question? So when we talk about all these things about what's going on at the NCAA and Congress and whatnot, it always comes down to money, and as well it should. It's not easy to make money in this business day and age. And I'll leave it with this thought, Andy, and this is going to be a big time theme throughout the college basketball season is those who follow these things closely. You and I do, but there are people who are deep in the weeds on this. They're already saying that this draft class was really, really good. 2027 is not generating that kind of buzz. You have some really good freshmen coming in, guys like Caleb Holt, Bruce Branch going to BYU, Teron Stokes going to Kansas, but they are not generating the kind of buzz that we saw with this year's class. So get used to hearing it during the college basketball season in 26-27. Oh, this draft class is going to be the worst since whatever. So that's just what it's going to be, but we're not going to know until a few years down the road if that is in fact true. So that ties a bow on the 2026 NBA draft. Andy and I will be back on the Hoops HQ show to talk a lot more about college hoops. Come on back. Hey everybody, Seth and Andy back with you on the Hoops HQ show. So the last show that we did, Andy, as we were going to air, there was a big shockwave through the world of basketball. It was the day before the NBA draft. Dusty May, the reigning national championship head coach at the University of Michigan, decided to go to the Dallas Mavericks, take over that job. Mike Boynton, his assistant, was named his interim replacement. Now, according to reports, a lot of reports, the Mavericks showed great interest in John Shire, which would have made sense because, of course, John Shire coached Cooper Flagg at Duke. Shire apparently did not take advantage of that opportunity, and that left an opening for Dusty May. So there are a couple ways you want to go with this. I want to start with this overall narrative. And I'm just I have to say, Andy, I'm so amazed at how many people fall into this trap. I really am. And I hope that doesn't sound too condescending. Maybe it is. This idea, oh, this is a death knell for college basketball, like, oh, Dusty didn't like the transfer portal and didn't want to have to deal with all this stuff. And I'm sure there's truth to that. I mean, a lot of coaches don't like, and by the way, I don't think it's necessarily, people need to understand like the transactional nature of it. Oh, I don't like having to pay guys or having those conversations and having them leave. It's the lifestyle. It's the fact that as soon as the season ends, you're headed for the worst 6 weeks of the year. Whereas it wasn't too long ago that once the season ended, you could maybe have a little vacation with your family, take a deep breath. So that part of it is difficult. There's a lot more time that goes into fundraising. So I get all of that. And this was the right choice for Dusty. But if Dusty May leaving Michigan for the Mavericks is a bad sign for college basketball, what does it mean that John Shire stayed? What does it mean that, as we now know, we didn't really know this at the time, Tom Izzo took a very serious look at the Phoenix Suns, obviously owned by his former walk-on guard, Matt Ishbia. And from what I understand, Izzo really considered that opportunity. He's turned down a lot of NBA opportunities. Who complains more about the transfer portal than Tom Izzo? A couple of years ago, Dan Hurley was offered the Lakers job, and everybody wrote the same story. Oh, college basketball, this is a sign that college basketball is a mess and it needs to be fixed. They're losing all these guys. Jay Wright retiring, all that. And then Dan Hurley turned down the Lakers to stay at UConn, and nobody seemed to write the story. So, yeah, college basketball has challenges, but narratives are tricky. This is the first coach in 7 years to go from college to the NBA. And Andy, let me just end with this and I'll let you talk. We've been doing this a long time. College coaches have always wanted to go to the NBA. It's all ball. They don't have to deal with recruiting and academics. This has been the case for a very, very long time. The money is incredible. It's the ultimate basketball league. So I assume you're just going to agree with everything I just said as usual.
Yeah. And look, first of all, let's look at, if you want to do the top 25, you name it. Okay. Two things. Number one, there's only two guys outside of Dusty May that I could see would be attractive to the NBA. Okay. And that is John Shire and probably Todd Golden, but it would have to be the right situation. And it might have been had Steve Kerr not gone back to the Warriors because of Golden's relationship with the Warriors ownership when he was the head coach at San Francisco. Remember, he played at St. Mary's and worked there as well. These other guys, are they going to take the calls? Of course they're going to take the calls. Kelvin Sampson is taking the calls. Go way back to Nolan Richardson. All these different guys have taken calls. Izzo, Detroit, Cleveland, Atlanta, Phoenix. Hurley, to his credit, knows he's not an NBA guy. He's a ball coach, yes, but he's a controlling one, and it wouldn't work. I respect that he recognized where he fits. And John Calipari didn't work, I could go down the list. John Beilein didn't work.
Disaster.
Disaster. You could argue Lon Kruger, Leonard Hamilton, maybe they had terrible rosters, which is true, but didn't work. By the way, as you know, it's actually happening more the other way. Kevin Young, Mike Bibby, Luke Lux, all left the NBA to go to college basketball as head coaches. Oh, and by the way, Mike Malone, North Carolina. So I think it's more coming back to college. I do not, I just don't buy the narrative, because while they may be frustrated with the portal and having to pay guys and and not having the control they used to have, they're still, they still have some control, and they wouldn't have any in the NBA. It's 100% a players league. You are quickly replaceable. I mean, Thibodeau out. Here's Mike Brown. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean,
there are literally a handful of guys in the NBA who have been able to last, for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a great point, because, I mean, I do think that the vast majority of college basketball coaches, if they have an opportunity to go to the NBA, they would go. But to your point,
doesn't mean they would work.
Well, yes, but that's a different question,
Yes.
right? But what's interesting as I'm listening to you talk is the guys who are most attractive to the pros are the guys who have the best jobs. Like John Shire has the best job. And of course he went there and he's got it built to last, and he knows that. And so that's all part of the calculation. I hadn't really thought about it like that, but which is not to say that college basketball doesn't have its challenges with all these disruptions. Let's touch on this though before we move on to a different topic. Mike Boynton is now the interim head coach. And so far, he hasn't lost any players. Now, they have the ability to go back into the transfer portal for 15 days and shop themselves around by rule. So far, that hasn't happened. That's a Final Four roster that he's got. Now, Mike Boynton's a pretty good basketball coach. I'm not saying he's Dusty May yet, but he's going to have good players.
Did recruit and coach Cade Cunningham, by the way.
Yes, well, he hired Cade's brother. That's another conversation.
Yes.
But those...
Or was it his dad? I can't remember.
No, his older brother. But he recruited those players, and those players like him. They're going to want him to get the job. And so there's this kind of assumption that, they're going to do a national search and get a quote unquote big name. I liken this to what happened at Texas when Chris Beard had to leave because he had an off-court incident and he left Rodney Terry a great roster. They went after a lot of big time guys, but at the end of the day, Rodney Terry got that team to the second weekend and they almost had to keep him, and I think Mike Boynton has that opportunity. Michigan's going to be one of the best jobs. Now, we're going to hear the name Billy Donovan a lot, and Billy Donovan's name is going to come up for a lot of college jobs. I feel very confident in reporting this, Andy, because there's a lot of thought that Billy Donovan doesn't want to coach in college. That is not true. Billy Donovan, I can tell you, is very open to the idea of coaching in college. The problem was he was always in the NBA, and the season ended too late for him to consider any college jobs. He's unemployed. He's living in Florida. He's hanging out. And come next spring, he will have his pick of any top college job. I'm not saying he's definitely going to do it. Now Michigan might make that approach, but I'm just saying, let me ask you this question. What are the chances in your view that Mike Boynton could in fact end up being the permanent head coach at Michigan at the end of the season?
Well, I think there's definitely a good chance depending upon what happens. And he's going to have a pretty long runway. I think it's different when, we've seen in the past where a coach gets fired. And I'll be honest. And look, he's done a good job this last year. I think he saved his job. But Jake Diebler is a great example here. Okay, because Jake Diebler, if that job opens in a traditional sense, and Chris Holtmann doesn't get fired in the middle of the season, and just Jake Diebler's out in the open, pool of candidates, I don't think he gets the job.
100%.
Okay, he gets the job, and the players want to play for him. Bruce Thornton played for him, didn't leave, could have left. And then finally this year they get to the tournament. And now he's got players coming in and things are starting to, move in the right direction. But it could have gone sideways easily this year, where it would have been a case where, and Ohio State and Michigan are very similar. Michigan has a better basketball track record, but football rules it. What happens with the football coach is more important there. We know that. So you and I disagree on this. I do think the timing mattered for the money. Yes, people, could I find money for Ellie Cadeau? Could you find it? Probably, but it wouldn't be easy for a lot of these schools, because I know I've talked to these guys, they're tapped out. They really tap out for these rosters. And by the way, you've made promises to player X that he's going to play this, and you gave him $1 million, whatever. Oh, hey, Cadeau just became available. Sorry, I'm bringing him in. Well, wait a minute. What are you going to do with the guy you just paid $1 million for? So I think the timing contributed to this roster staying together. So now we'll see how it all plays out over the next 10 months.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a fair point. It's hard to find a new home. And it is interesting, but Mike Boynton, he did a good job at Oklahoma State. It ran its course. He's got really good players. And I'm not saying he's mediocre, but I'm saying give me the mediocre coach with the great roster versus the brilliant coach with the lousy players. 7 days a week and twice on Sundays. So it's going to be interesting season coming up, interesting winter in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and happy trails to Dusty May. He certainly left college basketball a winner. He may be back in a few years. You never know. Andy and I will be back as well right after this. Welcome back to the special hour-long edition of the Hoops HQ show. Seth Davis along with Andy Katz. So we are heading into a very interesting time of year on the college basketball beat, and that is summer recruiting. And it's interesting for a lot of different reasons. There are these really big-time events, especially the ones that are sponsored by the major sneaker companies, Nike and Adidas. Nike has the EYBL circuit. Adidas has 3 stripes. There's a big week coming up in the middle of July where you have the Peach Jam taking place in North Augusta, South Carolina, right outside of Augusta, Georgia, just right down the street from Augusta National, where they play the Masters. And then in Rock Hill, South Carolina, Adidas also has their showcase event. So if you could picture this, I've always said to Andy, to basketball junkies, if you really love college basketball, you got to get to one of these events because you have the spectacle of multiple courts going on where you have every single court every single player is basically a Division I prospect, and many of the players playing in those events are going to be in the NBA in a couple of years, and you have the best of the best. I mean, we've seen every great player come through there. You see all kinds of characters, like when LeBron James coaching his son, Bryce, coaching it like it was Game 7 of the NBA Finals. I mean, it was so intense. But the real spectacle is the fact that every college head coach and head assistant coach, they're making the rounds, they're watching players, they're networking, they're recruiting. I mean, it is just a big mob fest. Media people, a lot of it is live and live stream. But, high school recruiting, of course, Andy, has changed because of the transfer portal. So it's become less of an emphasis. Again, we heard all this narrative of college coaches aren't even going to show up anymore because they're just going to recruit to the transfer portal. That's just not true, because if there's basketball being played, they feel like they have to be there to watch. But I'm wondering if you feel like, guys like us, we've been doing this, more than 60 years between us, a lot of coverage of high school recruiting. Does it feel to you like high school recruiting is truly being de-emphasized?
Yes. And I'm going to date myself here to those watching and listening. I don't think you can duplicate what Sonny Vaccaro and company and the late George Raveling, what they put together. I mean, those events at ABCD and Teaneck, New Jersey, and the Nike camp in Indianapolis. I witnessed, like you, some unbelievable games in the summer that were appointment viewing. I mean, gyms that were packed, when LeBron was playing, or Lamar Odom, guys that ended up, not turning into something, having issues for whatever reason. I can go back to, a guy I covered in Fresno, Skip to my Lou, Ray for Alston, who ended up getting to the NBA. But there were so many different guys back in that era that it was a scene. I mean, everybody was there. It was a scene. And I'm not diminishing Peach Jam and, what goes on in Rock Hill and all that. And, I've been once in the last few years. I don't have to go now. And I haven't felt the need to go, to be honest, because it hasn't mattered as much. Think about like St. John's, for example, what Rick Pitino's doing. He's not pounding the pavement for high school freshmen, right? Or, freshman high school seniors. He's going international, he's going portal, because obviously this point in his life and career, he wants to win now. He's not developed, he's not waiting. And I think there's more coaches like that than not. Some obviously like John Calipari, the Kentuckys and Kansas of the world, and Duke, Carolina, they still want to get, the top players. But think about like even Indiana, which was sort of built on that high school senior from the state of Indiana or the region, back in that Bob Knight era, that's how they were built. Now, I mean, it's all about who did Darren DeVries get in the portal? No one's really talking about what freshmen they've got coming in. It's about who did they get in the portal. And I think that program is a big, change in sort of where we are right now.
Yeah, guys like Mick Cronin who just basically don't do it, and he's in Los Angeles, which is incredibly fertile ground for high school talent. I don't think it's so much. I agree with what you're saying. You want older players. I do think that coaches wouldn't mind bringing in high school players if they thought they would stay. I think that's really what it comes down to. And so what you and I hear a lot from these coaches is, I'm not taking a high school senior unless he can play for me right away. Now, we just talked earlier in the show about the NBA draft and how many college freshmen played in the draft. Look at the success that Tommy Lloyd had in Arizona, bringing in, 6 or 7 freshmen last year. A couple of them went pro, but a couple of them came back and they're going to develop coming through. So part of it is, sort of by necessity. You mentioned about Rick Pitino, and I've talked to Rick about this. Part of his issue is that St. John's is kind of a commuter school, right? So it's not really set up well for high school freshmen. And what we hear a lot, coaches saying, I'm not bringing a guy in as a freshman unless he's ready to contribute right away. I'd rather have someone who's 20 or 21, maybe a low NBA ceiling, versus a freshman who's projected to be a really good NBA player but can't help me win right away. So that's kind of the position they're in. I will say this, though, I know you and I hear this a lot too, is that it used to be if you were depending on high school recruiting, you had to babysit a guy for 3 years, right? You identify him as a freshman or sophomore in high school. We're talking about, these events like the Peach Jam. The coaches aren't necessarily there to evaluate players so much as be seen, right? They want the player that they're trying to recruit, see them in their shirt that has the colors of their school. And so nowadays with NIL and pay for play, they don't have to do that anymore. Like I saw Brad Underwood at a golf tournament a while back, and he's like, I don't even see these guys play in person anymore. I see them on film. My assistants see them, and it's like, what's the number? You talk to the agent, and so I think in a lot of respects they kind of prefer that. And now what we have coming down the pike is this 5-and-5 rule, which actually looks like it's going to pass. How it does with the legal challenges, we'll see. I think it's got a really good chance to hold up, but it's going to be over time. So it's going to go into place next year. Go ahead. Yeah.
Let's qualify. The legal challenge is not whether it will actually exist. The legal challenge is when it should, who should, if any of the current players who will be seniors, or maybe some that just graduated, if they can get in on it. But they're not fighting that 5-and-5 should exist. They want to widen the pool of players who should have access to
it. So the argument that these players are making is, if this rule was in effect last year, I'd have another year. That is true.
Yes.
I would also say to them, respectfully, you got so much more money than players who played 5 or 6 years ago, and you benefited from that change in a way they didn't. So that is, part of what happens. It's going to take some time for that legally to play itself out. The idea that, they're going to be able to apply themselves to this rule by the start of the season. You were talking early in the show about rosters that are already filled, NIL money that's already committed. How could they even do this anyway? If this takes time and now we're pushing it to the, 27, 28 season, is it even realistic for those players? It wouldn't surprise me, by the way, that there's going to be a legal challenge to the 5-and-5 rule, because it was really put in place to have an age maximum. So you couldn't have, 27, 28-year-old players from overseas, or maybe who didn't play in college or went in the military or whatever. And so I do think there might be legal challenges coming in, but it is not easy for high school seniors to play their way into college basketball because of what we just described, or I would say more accurately, they do have to start at a lower level they might otherwise have. people say, well, it's not fair to the mid-majors because they have all these really good players for a couple of years and then they go to a power conference school. But those mid-major schools have access to high school recruits at a level that they wouldn't have been able to have before. And they can get some bounce back players who went to power conference programs, didn't play, and now they transfer down to the mid-major level. But as the 5-and-5 rule plays out, Andy, what I'm hearing is everyone saying we're going to go back to that COVID senior where college basketball is just going to be really old and it's going to be that much harder for high school seniors to play in college. Is that how you see it playing out?
Yes, but I do like the fact that they didn't do it's 19 years old, okay? And from that point forward for 5 years, so 19 essentially to 24. So there's a cap on the back end. So I like that. I like that basically you have 5 years. You want to redshirt 1 year? Redshirt. If you want to play all 5, great, play all 5. The NCAA committee that dealt with waivers, was in a no-win situation because that committee had to, and keep in mind, this is made up of, membership people from other schools, and you have to decide, was this kid's grandmother sick? She really, they were making too many decisions, with documentation, all these kinds of things. They didn't need to be in that business. So they're hoping that the waivers are gone. What are the exemptions? The exemptions are military service, and there is an exemption for if you take a Mormon mission. So if you take a Mormon mission, you still can be in that for 7 years because that used to be the case where someone who took a Mormon mission, you would have your 4 playing years. You could redshirt, that's 5, plus the 2 you were on a mission. So you had 7 years if you did the whole thing, and that still will exist. There's that religious exemption, and of course, military service. And then I think there probably could be some outliers, like if you have a heart condition. But again, they want to stay away from that gray area. The one league that I'm going to be intrigued to see how that really, if there's one league that's going to get hurt the most, it's going to be the Ivy League, because the Ivy League still will not allow its students to go 5 years. You are in and out in 4. If you can somehow graduate early, great. But, we're seeing this. Caden Pierce is a great example, who's now going to be playing at Purdue, was at Princeton. He just didn't play last year to preserve that last year because the Ivy League does not allow you to have more than 4 years. If you get hurt, you have to literally leave campus or you burn that year. You cannot redshirt and get another year. It's freshman to senior, and that's it.
Well, my hope is that if and when this 5-and-5 goes on the books, and it looks like that's what's going to happen, that it does bring some semblance of, logic to this process of who gets to play in college basketball. We were talking about the NBA draft. I know I'm going to butcher his name. Narcisse Noy, is that how it's pronounced? Who the Houston Rockets drafted him, traded him, of course, to the Clippers, 57th pick in the draft. He's going to Auburn. You've heard the phrase draft and stash, where guys draft, NBA teams draft international players and they don't count against the cap. You can be an international player. You're automatically eligible for the draft. They don't have like a deadline to declare for the draft if you're international. And so the Rockets drafted this kid. And he's like, well, I'm going to Auburn. And a lot of people don't, understand the rules on that. They are different for international players. If you play in college and you declare yourself for the NBA draft and you stay in past the deadline, it doesn't matter what happens from there. You have forfeited your college eligibility. And we talk about these legal cases now. The NCAA won another really important case about these. They're called MMRs, these multimedia rights company, which is kind of like the new collectives, which is these relationships where they're getting money to the players in a way that gets around the salary cap provisions from the House settlement. And it's the Collegiate Sports Commission, which is supposed to, police that and monitor that and declare whether something is a true NIL. They're trying to say that the payment from these MMRs did not fall into that category as an associated entity. And the judge said that it did. So the NCAA got another win. It's probably going to go to Judge Wilkin, but she's the one who certified the House settlement. So It's just a sense that there might be some order coming to what has been a very disorderly world. So it's going to be really interesting. But hey, the bottom line with these summertime events is they're a lot of fun. Everybody is there watching what happens. And if you get a chance to go to one of these events, you will see the next generation of college basketball stars. So, and it's going to be interesting. By the way, is there any storyline in recruiting in terms of what coaches are getting what? One thing that I'll throw out at you is I think this is a very important cycle for Mark Pope. There's this semblance, the sense that, Kentucky is not recruiting either in high schools or in the transfer portal at the level that it has in the past, despite having unlimited or the highest, NIL resources of any college. Would you agree with that about Mark Pope? Is there anybody else you're watching in terms of this is a big year for them recruiting wise?
Well, you're right. And anytime you have a new athletic director, which he does, that puts added pressure on. So yes, I think that this is a big year for them. I think it's a big year for Indiana on the court. Because the success of the football program has put actually more pressure on the basketball program. And they had some misses last year in their portal. They feel really good about, especially getting someone like Marcus Burton from Notre Dame, and Brian Lindsay from Villanova. So they got their backcourt if everyone's healthy. But I think it's a big year for Indiana in general. So there you got two of the highest profile programs that we both rattled off that I think 26, 27 will be pretty critical years for those head coaches.
Yep. So follow along in terms of the recruiting coverage, of course, hoopshq.com and elsewhere. Summertime is going to be hot. Andy and I will be back to wrap things up on the Hoops HQ show, and special hour-long edition right after this. Seth Davis, Andy Katz with you on the Hoops HQ show to wrap up this special hour-long edition. We've got a couple of topics to hit. First of all, yet another really powerhouse non-conference game was announced this past week. North Carolina is going to play Illinois on January 30th in Nashville, Tennessee, the great city of Nashville, Tennessee. Ton of these games coming our way. First of all, we have the traditional, Thanksgiving week. That time of year, tournaments, the Players Era Festival continues to grow and tweak its format. A lot of really good showcases. Duke, Michigan looks like that is actually going to happen, I guess, in Miami now. UConn, BYU, Arkansas is playing Duke. The CBS Sports Classic. There was a time when these games were few and far between. Now they're popping up all the time. How good is this for college basketball?
Yeah, I mean, St. John's announced the game with Arizona at MSG. That's what's great. I mean, all this chatter about, and this dovetails off the 76, where I got to credit these head coaches, their athletic directors, these conferences, is if we expanded to 76 and then it was all bye games early, fine. Maybe that narrative might have worked, that the regular season would have been less attractive. That's completely the opposite of what is happening. And yes, the networks pay good, top dollar for this, but every time I turn around, the top 25 schools are playing great games, one-offs. And it used to be these schools would never go to someone else's gym. That's not happening. Yes, we have some of these neutrals. You just rattled one off, but a lot of these are home and homes, and they're trying to play more of them. And I think it's great. And I think it's only going to help. And then, by the way, to get us even more ready, another great rule that happened is, these exhibition games that can be televised, that can be peer-to-peer. UConn announced two of them that are blockbusters. Purdue's coming to UConn, rematch of that title game a couple of years ago, and which could be a precursor to them playing in the regular season. Danny Hurley and Jerry McNamara agreed to play each other at the Mohegan Sun in an exhibition game. But that would be great if we have UConn Syracuse back on the regular schedule. And I think this is sort of a test case, if you will. And I won't be shocked if it happens. So we're going to have great games in November, actually October, November, December. And then, the fact that they're playing this game in January, between Illinois and North Carolina, that's great. Duke, Michigan, that game is in December, but last year was in February. So all the, getting kind of those kind of games in late January, early February is good for the sport and it's good for these teams.
Yeah, I love your point about the exhibitions, by the way, because for a long time there was a rule against doing them and televising them. We have these close scrimmages and you're not allowed to put the stats out. I mean, it's just so silly. I mean, it's so hard. It's such a cluttered landscape in terms of sports media, and there's so much live sports. There's never been a better time to be a sports fan. I mean, you go from the college baseball World Series to the World Cup and the Stanley Cup Finals and all that. And so for college basketball to limit its chance to get exposure, it's not like there's a huge demand on TV for this stuff anyway. But some of those games, I remember St. John's and Michigan played in the Garden last year. It went to overtime. It's a great game. To me, it wasn't less fun because it was an exhibition. Anytime college basketball can showcase its big brands, its celebrity coaches, it's fun for the players. And you're right. I mean, these games in November and December are especially helpful because that is the heart of football season. And as we know in America, football is king, but college basketball is able to edge its way to the table during that time. So I agree with you. It's been a great development. We're going to end with something that's a little bit of a downer, just, to say the least, very sobering. And it's interesting, Andy. I wrote about this on hoopshq.com. If you're a college basketball fan, I know you follow folks like me and Andy on Twitter, other college basketball writers as well, broadcasters, people inside the game. On Thursday night, a man passed away named Kenny Klein. He was a longtime sports information director at the University of Louisville. He's been at St. John's the last couple of years because Rick Pitino, who used to be at Louisville, liked Kenny so much, bought him a car, brought him with him to St. John's. And, people don't know what a sports information director does. He's the gateway for people like me and Andy to be able to cover the program, whether it's applying for a credential, getting taken care of on site, where we're sitting, where we're parking, all that stuff. But most importantly, access to coaches, access to players. If you want to get a phone interview with a player, you're going to talk to the sports information director and try to set something up. Can you get me a coach on the phone? These guys work for the coaches, and some coaches are real media friendly. A lot of them are not. A lot of them, they'll give you some, but maybe not a lot. And the SIDs are a little bit afraid to go to bat. Kenny was always the type of person who would go to bat for you, who would help you out. But more than that, he was just a great guy. And unfortunately, he had a tragic choking incident in a restaurant. And it took some time for them to sort of figure out what was going on, and he didn't make it. So we lost him. And, Andy, my kind of takeaway from this outpouring on social media about Kenny, we've known him for so long, loved the man so much. You almost felt like, you were his favorite, right? Like he treated you special. And then you see all these stories about him on Twitter and social media. It's like, it wasn't that special. He was like that with everybody. I mean, he was really one of the most universally liked and respected, and just a great human being, and just a really sad loss for those of us who knew him.
Well, if you're listening to us, you're not seeing what Seth is wearing, and he's wearing a shirt that says "Please be kind," an expression that he puts out almost daily. And I will say that Kenny was always kind, and he dealt with a lot of stuff, at Louisville, and yet he was always kind, warm, engaging. Um, and so, yeah, I think now, he helped me so many different times in covering Louisville, and at the NCAA tournament, the Final Four. It's his stat crew for the last 30 something years has been working the Final Four. And then of course, most recently at St. John's. But that's not what I think about. I think about just him as the person. And, he, I mean, my birthday always falls either the day before the title game, the day of the title game, the day after. And so I've gone out a couple different times with him around the Final Four. And I remember, I think it might have been in one of the cities, and it was either New Orleans, one of the cities in Houston, in Texas. And he's famous for dipping people. And Kenny was a big guy, and I don't think I'm a small guy. And I swear he lifted me up and flipped me over and gave me a big bear hug. And that's just sort of who he was. And so, when Rick Pitino, who I feel, I'm sending my condolences out to Rick, because I mean, it's one thing when you lose a family member and, to his devoted wife and children, and I mean, his extended family, but like Rick lost, like, you know, a true brother, if you will, good friend, someone that was by his side through a lot of stuff and never, ever wavered. But was always fair to the media dealing with Rick as well. So yeah, I think of the goodness and yeah, I mean, like a lot of people, I'm just sad about it. I mean, it just feels sad because I know as we continue to cover the sport and do a St. John's game or be at the Final Four during the tournament, whatever, we won't see him. And that will feel empty. And so, he was just a great human being. He was, as your shirt says, he was always kind.
Yeah. Very well said. I'm going to miss him too. It's shocking when something like this happens. And I think it reminds all of us that you just never know what the day's going to bring. So enjoy the day. Be grateful for your blessings. And Kenny Klein, you will be missed. If there's any solace that comes out of this, it's the fact that so many people who would not otherwise have any idea who this man was now know a lot about him because everybody went on. It was all, Twitter's like this ugly place, Andy, and it was almost like it became a great community that I could read through all the tributes to him and just understand that I was not alone in my grief and my sadness. So Kenny Klein, we're going to miss you.
And I will say this thing, Seth.
Yeah.
It was nonpartisan.
Yeah.
You had Governor Andy Beshear,
right.
Tweet out about him. And there was one point on the Senate floor where Senator Mitch McConnell talked about him.
Yeah.
So that's when you've done things right.
Yeah.
When you got both sides of the aisle saying nice things about you.
Everybody loved Kenny. We're going to have a nice, thick glass of bourbon to toast to Kenny Klein. So anyway. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Hoops HQ show. We're going to take a little bit of a summer hiatus, but it won't be long until we'll be back with you talking about college basketball. Andy, we've had a great run with this show. We started it in January, I believe, in the teeth of the season, building our audience. I want to thank everybody for, watching and listening and helping us grow. And believe me, big things are ahead for Hoops HQ and the Hoops HQ show. And so I'll ask you to head on over to hoopshq.com every day, all year round. We're going to be covering recruiting, covering everything about college basketball. It won't be long before we're going to be deep into preview season. All these rosters have turned over. We're going to help keep you track of all of that. Go to hoopshq.com/subscribe. Use podcast for your promo code. You'll get a 50% off of a membership to Hoops HQ. Again, use the word podcast at hoopshq.com/subscribe. For Andy Katz, I'm Seth Davis. Thanks for watching the Hoops HQ show.